No-hit Sharma. That is not what you want to be referred to when a short time before, Viv Richards has said you might be one of the best batters in the world. And you aren't, right? At least you're stunted, kind of lost down the order, not sure what to do. And it wasn't that Rohit was bad. He started with 200s. But he did bat at times as if he was confused as to what his purpose was. A player cut adrift from motivation or role definition. Maybe he simply wasn't necessary. And so he was like your fourth nicest suit, sitting in the closet on the rare days you get that far into your rotation. And then late in his career, he's opening. That is never a good sign that you're an important part of the batting lineup. The middle order player thrust upwards is really more of a hope, an experiment. It's like where you sit your least favorite uncle at a wedding. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you're out of the family. Instead, Rohit Sharma became a late stage opener and made it work. And now he was setting the scene. So here is my favorite stat on him. In tests where the average was more than 30, Rohit was actually 10% worse than we'd expect compared to the rest of the top order in that match. In tests where the average was low, under 30, the ball or wicket was doing something, he was absolutely freaking magnificent. Rohit Sharma needed something to inspire him. And the harder the wicket, the more he scored. Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting. Numbers are great, but Rohit Sharma had something else. This almost rubber-like way of hitting the ball. He never muscled it. He didn't punch it. And even when slogging, it was without violence. He had one of those beautifully rubber bats where he always seemed to be tapping the ball and then it would disappear as if shot out of a cannon. He would shuffle into line, clip a straight drive, and the ball would travel faster than physics suggested it should have. He was a big guy with a feather touch. He looked like he could have been a bruiser, but he batted as if he had a poet's soul. Short, minimalism with a pretty flourish. He was part of every movement, yet detached from it. As if at once playing a flick off his pads for six, while also sipping chai with his friends and laughing at the ease in which he did it. It all looked so easy until the magic ball often arrived. Rohit, as an opener, averaged more than batting down the order. And that is extraordinary, because he wasn't just a middle order guy going up a spot. Rohit batted at 6. That is the cruisiest test batting position you can be in. That is where kids used to start and old fellas would end up, where you put your 5th bowling option if he's okay with the bat. Opening is way tougher. In fact, it is just obviously the hardest spot. When we were writing The Art of Batting, we had to factor in that openers make fewer runs than anyone else. There is a tax on batting at the top of the order. And Rohit did not pay it. And remember that Rohit played 14 tests in 2024 as an opener. The most matches he'd ever played in a year by a distance. And yet, even with all those matches, his average is still way better when opening. Remember, there was a bit of a pattern of players opening the batting after doing really well in ODI cricket. So let's talk about his fellow double centurion opening brother, Martin Guptill. Both of them ended up top for their nations in white ball cricket and then red ball. And in Guptill's case, it just never worked. Ever. Not even close. All that talent, but the red ball tormented him. The biggest challenge for opening the batting is the lateral moving ball. Guptill had a lot of that in New Zealand. So for Rohit, you really have to check similar kind of numbers. And to be honest, there are no straight lines here for Rohit. Look at his match factor for each location. He was horrendous in Australia and South Africa, but magnificent on Indian wickets and in the UK. Try straightening that out. But being good in England, and not just decent, but in his case, outstanding, is really a huge effort against the new ball. However, no one would have him marked down as a consistent opener. Western Australians Chris Rogers and Simon Katich would walk out to bat and come back with a score almost every time. They have very high median scores. Rohit is way down the other end, making more hundreds than 50s as an opener. He was all or nothing. So his variation of scores is really quite high. But that also suits the kind of player he was. You don't really want Rohit to open like Chris Rogers. You want the power, threat, and intent. Because if he made 100, you would feel it. No one wanted to bowl to him. So his runs hit harder. And the greatest sides of all time usually have that kind of opener. The one that keeps the opposition captain up at night. And as I said, Rohit made hundreds a lot. He made them more than 50s. Only 2 other openers ever converted more often than he did. He was either out early or making 100. It's not conventional, but it was brutal to go up against. But let's be honest, he is not one of the greatest openers of all time. But average is probably an unfair way to look at him. For most of his career, he batted on really tricky wickets at home and away. And so we still have him as 25% better than other top order players in his games. Chris Rogers has a higher average, but Rohit a better match factor. But even adjusting for that, we're not looking at a huge impact overall, just on occasion. And when you make less than 3,000 runs opening, and your last year of Test cricket is 14 matches while your form is so bad that you have to drop yourself, that is going to tank your overall numbers. Recently, I did a video where I called him one of the greatest all-format batters ever. That really seemed to anger people. And yet, it seems like a pretty obvious statement. Perhaps ODI is the only format that he was great on his own. But the collective of all three for him is massive. Yet despite having won a World Cup, Champions Trophy, a bunch of IPLs, and leading a pretty fantastic Test side, Rohit isn't as universally adored as he should be. And the online battles between his fans and Virat's make everything quite toxic. But Rohit was a fantastic player when it mattered, if not all the time. Like, when India decided to turn their pitches into the hardest to bat on of any ever concocted by man, Rohit stood up. There were some times when he looked like the only batter who could. The home wickets tanked the numbers of Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane, but it seemed to give Rohit a new purpose, something that he had always been looking for. Opening started his new phase, but having to survive through wickets like that brought out the very best in a batter whose peaks were obscenely high. So let's go back to where we started. Rohit needed the mission to be at his best. At home, on wickets where the top 6 averaged more than 30, he was 25% better than normal. So he was fine on flat wickets without being absolutely spectacular. When India put out a pitch that absolutely no one could make a run on, he was 120% better than the top order batters in the matches that he was playing in. Some numbers stop you, and you just have to have a moment to yourself. This is one of those. Strangely, this smooth-looking number 6 batter needed the worst wickets in cricket and opening the batting to unlock the very best of him. But you didn't need to see any of these stats because you felt them. Rohit would open up on a wicket that had turn and bounce, and he'd be batting on it like none of it mattered. All while the poor guys at the other end are trying to handle invisible trampolines and 90-degree turn. Rohit Sharma was not one of the greatest Test batters of all time. But he could play innings that even some of the best to ever do it simply could not. No hit Sharma. That is not what you want to be referred to when you could be the hitman. A bruising figure with a velvet touch. A man who could, with a shrug of his large shoulders, decide to become an opener late in his career and only truly came to life when the wicket was almost impossible. If he was an actual hitman, he would have been the type who pretended to be a delivery driver or a lost dad in a lobby before perfectly pulling off his very dangerous assignment. And it is perhaps most ironic that the man called No Hit was, at times, the only one who could actually hit. Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today.